everyone. I'm Katye McGregor Bennett, your host of AV Trade Talk. A special episode today, and this is the first in a series with my friends from Kordz. I've got James Chen and Hugo Fitzjohn. We're going to do an intro there in a second, but I wanted to set up the conversation. And this is what we're calling the Mastering Connectivity series. And it's a series from Kordz that is intended to share with you Kordz' insights and answer your nagging curiosity about cables, cable infrastructure, cable quality, all of the things that go into a strong digital foundation. James, I'll let you kick off, if you would. Introduce yourself. And since we're here at the beginning, we may not have everyone all the way through to the end. Share your contact info, if you would. And then Hugo, follow him in, if you would.
So welcome, everyone. My name is James Chen. I'm the managing director of a cable company called Kordz, and we specialize in making professional-grade connectivity products for the integration market. I've been in this industry now for well over 30 years, and my experience includes pulling cables and programming, and also a lot of retail and distribution and building home cinemas and commercial, audiovisual in airports and the like. So, I bring my experience to this, and I bring my frustrations with what we've been experiencing for really the last 2 decades, and the frustration that connectivity continues to be, because we continue to deal with technology that won't grow up.
I love that. That won't grow up, but we will. We will encourage it to grow up, and that is part of the conversation that we are about.
And it never grows up as fast as we'd hope, or the experts keep telling us.
We will wrestle our teenage connectivity electronic technology woes.
Exactly. Hugo, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Share a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, share a little bit about yourself, and contact info too, if you would.
So real pleasure to be here on the podcast with both of you. So my name's Hugo Fitzjohn. I'm based in the UK, and I'm an AV consultant and product consultant and marketing consultant to the AV industry. So my favourite, I'm contractually obliged to say, favourite client obviously is Kordz. So it's a real pleasure to be here with those guys and supporting them. I've been in the industry, I guess, 25-ish years now. Started off doing live sound and lighting, accidentally got into commercial, and then kind of worked my way through working for an audio manufacturer. I've worked for installers, so I've had the kind of nitty-gritty of pulling cables. Worked for an alarm and CCTV installer in 2008 because I figured that during a recession people were going to be stealing stuff rather than buying new tech, but that didn't pan out. And so the whole world is connected with cables, and it's something that we always need. And it's nice to be involved in a company that helps the shiny lights flash on shiny boxes at either end, and make sure that everything's reliably connected and works.
Anywho, so topic du jour today. Let's dive right in. Essentially, what we want to touch on is why should we be paying more attention to cable infrastructure? In this series, we're going to be exploring what it means to be connected, what matters and what doesn't. We'll discuss the core topics at the heart of connected custom integration. We'll be inviting various industry experts onto future shows and the product development team at Kordz alongside them to share their knowledge and insights as we go along through this series of podcasts. So today we're going to kick off the series with an overview of why connectivity matters before we take a deep dive into subjects that go to the very heart of connectivity assured, which is, of course, one of Kordz' taglines. And Kordz, for those of you who are not familiar with the brands, I just want to stop and roll back. It's Kordz. If you're looking to engage with the company, it's www.kordz.com. We'll get to contact information again at the end of the show, and we'll get to social handles as well. So be sure and listen all the way through. Okay, or you can scrub through and find that at the end. However you want to get that information, we will provide it again towards the end of the show. So, all right, guys, let's dive right in. Today, why has the integration industry had connectivity all wrong from your point of view? What's been the situation? We're going to kind of go into the history a little bit here. What's been the problem, guys? Hugo, James, I'll let you either one.
Well, I think our the integration industry really came out of hi-fi. We're all selling hi-fi in the 80s, and our understanding of hi-fi with with regards to cabling was the discovery of the thicker the cable, the better, because there was less resistance. And hi-fi being essentially technology in the home, we started finding that from speakers we went to screens, and from screens we went to larger screens, and then we moved across to some sort of control system to make this ever-growing audio-visual system experience easier, and that naturally led to security, lighting, IoT, streaming services. Hugo, you can. I'm sure that there's plenty of products that we are now integrating that is kind of it's not like it's been forced on us, but we've kind of inherited because we are the technology access. Exponentially, technology has grown, and with that, we've now moved to digital connectivity. Now, digital connectivity is a very different form of technology, a different form of transmission, and we're now also dealing with a lot of different ways to connect, where the principle of thicker, and it's a very gross overgeneralization, the thicker is better. There are other scientific parameters to that analog improvement, but digital transmission requires a different type of understanding of cable infrastructure, and technology density requires a different application of cable technology. So a lot of people are still using the good old way, and finding out, well, if it ain't broke, but you don't know whether it's broke. So, and this is one of the fundamental things of the frog boiling in a pot. It doesn't know that it's broke. So, and we experience this shift in technology, and technology is growing exponentially. There was really interesting talk. NVIDIA showed us that we were no longer doubling our processing capacity every 18 months. In the last 8 years, we have increased our processing capacity over 100 times. Wow. So that is now showing exponential growth in terms of processing.
That's huge.
Yes, it's interesting your point, James, about starting off in the hi-fi world, because that was kind of my experience of moving to the residential installation side of things. Was I worked in a hi-fi shop that did installs, and those guys kind of got into having to deal with networks, and me myself as well, and all the connectivity issues that kind of go with that stuff was more by accident rather than design. Everybody in that shop was probably more excited about selling a record deck than getting involved with installing a network or control system. But it kind of happened to us. We didn't really get any choice in it, and then we had to start learning about how things worked. And yeah, as you say, James, there's that kind of baked into people's minds of the kind of analog thinking of how stuff hangs together. It's actually, it's so different when you get into the digital domain and start worrying about how we're going to get noughts and ones to places.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of people enter our industry from different areas, because our industry is a very interesting industry. It is technical or non-technical in terms of, like, it can include aspects of design, or it can include engineering principles. So we cross the band of right across the networking engineer, where you can have come from the computer science world, and you can have structured learning, to starting from not even high school education and entering in the industry and learning the trade, so to speak. And technically, we're not a trade yet, although we are trying to improve that. With learning on the job, and there's a lot to learn. And because of the unstructured nature, or the custom or the bespoke nature of what is delivered to every single home, the delivery is different. Therefore, the learning, the type of learning, or the way people experience and gain knowledge is different depending on who you're employed by, who is your superior. And sometimes you pick up good skills, and sometimes it's like, man, we're just going to make this work. And I think that, unfortunately, that is it's a bit of an odd way to kind of ensure connectivity.
Well, I think it's a really good point about our industry, actually, is, as you said, James, there's a lot to learn. And the trouble is that we have to know so much about so much to make all of it work. And I think then it's really easy for people to focus in on the shiny bits, how the screens work, how does the surround processor work, how do the exciting bits work, and overlook the fundamentals of, what are the highways that we're sending all of this data on. And for me, I think that's getting kind of to the crux of kind of connectivity assured. And what we're kind of probably going to talk about in this podcast series is like, how do we get the fundamentals that we build all the shiny stuff off? How do we get that right to make sure that the lights do come on and they stay on?
The other thing that we constantly fight is that the user doesn't know. Well, it's very difficult for them to predict what they want, because again, there is so much to know, and they're not the experts. They're only experiencing it based on they've seen it somewhere. And a lot of the infrastructure is unseen. People turn up to their house and the PowerPoints are there. They may or may not necessarily have marked them because they may or may not have built their house. And technology is moving so quickly, you just don't know what to wire for. So part of it is really trying to understand the standards, because when the house is being built, it's a lot cheaper to put infrastructure in because of the cost of labor. Or when you're having your home partially upgraded by installing some system, it's also cheaper because you've got the trades on site to then update the infrastructure that you've got. The most expensive way is just to get an electrician or an integrator or an installer to come in and do one thing at a time, because project times end up being long, labor ends up being expensive, and that's where your cost to performance really, really goes up.
Yeah. So you guys have all said, you've shared some very important insights there that I think help sort of build the position from where we're coming from here. Is some of the things that stand out most to me is really just where has the knowledge base come from that is allowing the integration community to make the right decisions in the field based on not only what they see the current needs of the property, whether that's a home or a commercial property, but then also having the understanding and the capability of then looking forward a little bit and making sure that what's going in today will support tomorrow. Not necessarily tomorrow, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, but literally tomorrow, 6 months to a year down the road. Things are changing so quickly. And I forget, it was James or Hugo, one of you mentioned that, just the rapid pace of technology evolution and needing to stay in front of that. And so the installations we're doing today really do need to be ready to tackle tomorrow as well. And I think that's a good segue into, let's talk about cable and cable infrastructure, but cable specifically in the design, the engineering, the manufacturing. What is it that allows or creates a scenario where cables can fail in the field? James, I think maybe kick off with you and then Hugo jump in.
I think, the last 2 decades, our purchasing patterns have really changed. The birth of internet and Ethernet infrastructure, which a lot of the audiovisual companies have jumped on, has really changed the way that we connect things and the way we experience things and the way we ultimately buy things. The power of the consumer is, I feel that almost it's the strongest that it's ever been, because the consumer themselves can demand a really, really cheap price for things. And once you see something at a particular price, that kind of sets the target for manufacturers to chase, because that's really to be competitive is the way to grow volume. Now, it's not the only way to go to market, but it is still one of the most prominent and easiest ways to expand any business. When you start doing that, we have truly left the time when proper engineering is done for every product all the time, every time. We experience electronic failure out there a lot, and those same shortcuts are applied to cabling. People are busy producing things, copying the way people are producing things. And when you make a copy of something or you make a transfer of an idea, the original idea is probably somewhat diluted. And because we're all moving so quickly, those techniques are, and that this includes tooling where we overstamp, we dyes to create products overused because we lack time and we just want to process quickly. Material itself is diluted because we can get away with it. There's less rigorous policing because there's just so much product out there that it's very difficult to catch people out. So there are manufacturers out there that really take this opportunity to deliver a more cost-effective and on the surface more attractive product. But then it doesn't deal with the long term. With cabling, one of the very important things that we need to understand, and I've touched on how it's put in, is at frame stage, it's the cheapest, or when the house is being built, that's the most cost effective. If you're retrofitting, it's better to retrofit more. So that is really the cost. Once the cable's in, and the important point is once it's in for life. It's very rare in a domestic dwelling, in a residential dwelling, or even in a hotel, that cable is stripped out. It's usually repurposed for something. Some new electronic technology comes along, and there are things during the manufacturing process that if you don't do, the cable degrades. And once that copper cable has degraded, or once that optical cable has become brittle, you can't recover the cable. You can only replace and run another cable. However, if the cable is good, then the infrastructure stays in that. You can repurpose that, and the electronics get better, and there's more power and more speed and more data that you can pump through the existing infrastructure. The cable is like a road. It's a 3-lane highway, or a 2-lane highway, or a one-lane highway, depending on how we construct it. But new technology allows us to get more down there. Cars become faster. They carry more people. They receive different designs. They become more efficient. We've invented a bus or a train, those types of technologies. So Hugo?
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, you reminded me of how incredible it is, actually, of the data that we've managed to squeeze down old cable. I mean, you think about the telephone system. So in the UK, we're actually going to turn the plain old telephone system off soon, but our internet has been coming down that. Now, back in the 1900s, when somebody was hooking up telephones and telephone exchanges, nobody had a clue that you could send data down it. You had to phone up an operator and get put through to somebody, rather than having, your Amazon order sent down that same piece of cable. So, yeah, I mean, that cable infrastructure that was put in was solid. And I think we can say the same about, network infrastructure that we put in. If it's going into a house, chances are that's going to be there for at least a decade, maybe 2, maybe even more. And if that's a solid foundation, you're going to be able to get faster and faster technologies down it as the technology moves on.
So I'll throw a common question back at you guys and let you each answer it. But I can save a little bit of money and make a little bit of extra profit if I downgrade my cable purchase. Is that such a bad thing?
Well, it might not be. You're just making future Katie a problem. It's really what it boils down to. So yeah, sure, go ahead, save yourself some money now, but cost yourself more later. I've been in that scenario myself with, doing jobs as a subcontractor for other people where they've really cheaped out on stuff, and then it cost them way more when we had to keep going back to site because time is way more expensive than cable in the long run, and you can't put a price on your reputation. How do you value that?
And by doing that, you're actually future-proofing yourself. See, this term future-proof, I have a war against this word. And I think we're using the word, well, our understanding of future-proof is incorrect. And I feel that the application of future-proof should be the same understanding as waterproof. When you make something waterproof, you make it resilient to water. So when you make something future-proof, you make it resilient to accepting the future. So it's the natural resistance. We should be future ready. We should understand and look, into the future about, how technology goes. But yeah.
I love that explanation, James. Thank you for going there because I think it does. It sets up really nicely for how this conversation needs to be shaped, but not just from our point of view. It's how it needs to be received too. So it's a really good analogy.
So that's my challenge to the market.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So for all the listeners, you can have a little giggle when you see this terminology, future-proof, which is out there a lot.
Well, and we'll talk more in a future episode about James's war on the term future-proofing.
We could probably have a whole episode on that, to be fair.
Absolutely, and we should. It's not on the list, but I just wrote it down. It's going on the list.
Yeah, the string of expletives that James can say.
Exactly. No, it's one of the, I commonly equate it to, we walk around with very expensive phones, which essentially are small computers, and they cost about the same thing. Why on earth then, when we go to the convenience store and we see the 10-foot long USB cord to charge our phone, are we like, oh, we should, maybe that's a great price. That's a great price. And you realize you take it home and it's not going to sync. It might charge, it might not charge fully. It's going to overheat. It's all of the things, but it's so enticing to spend a little bit and get what you think is more. And in the reality,
but it will go on fire. It will go on fire.
Right. So this is the thing, and I think my conversation with the community, our integration community, which is what this is intended for, is that's the thing: is do not be fooled by a lower price option that you think is going to provide the best result. You are going to have a compromise, and right here, a great segue.
One of the things, and we mentioned price. I think in a lot of conversations, we collapse price with performance, i.e. it is assumed that when you pay more, you get more performance, and when you pay less, you get less performance. There is a certain point where that is not true. Just take a little snippet of history here. Why do we have braided cables, right? And why do we think that it was, it's such a good idea? Because we didn't have plastics until, the mid-century, but we had motor cars and we had telephone exchanges, and all of the cables originally were wrapped in cotton. That was the insulation. And when the cotton got wet or it had got oil on it, it wore out. And then we would have massive electrical issues and shorts. So reliability was a big thing. Since plastics have come on, reliability's gone through the roof. But we still kind of are attracted to this suit that we can put on a cable, when it's like an extra cost. And this is one of those things where you pay more, but you you're not getting more performance. I've never seen anyone, after their system's connected, go to the back of their Blu-ray player and go, "Hey, check out my cable." Doesn't that look great and shiny? You might do that in a computer rack or an equipment rack.
Well, having worked in a hi-fi shop, I can assure you there were some crazy cables that were sort of like $3,000 where people would show you them.
Yeah.
That's
so
different. That's a hi-fi shop, but you are right.
And then we're referring back to the '80s again. So
yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting understanding where we might have trend or an old belief that has just continued on with us, where something that's well braided can be assumed to be well made, when the braiding generally offers zero performance. You can argue with headphone cables and things like that, where it makes it silences the noise. But when a cable is static in the wall, we're talking about things like how to install it quicker. Sure, you can buy something that's more quality. It takes you half the time to install it, provided that you're getting a professional to come and do it. Then that professional's hourly rate is halved. So there are many other aspects in terms of cost improvement on a project. Yeah.
I think one of the problems that I've come up against loads over the years is the problem with network cables is it's called Cat5, Cat5e, Cat6, Cat6a. Everyone assumes, particularly the people that are buying this stuff, or that it's all the same quality. Because it has that, it appears to have that standard. The consumer at the end has no idea. It's like, what? Well, it's Cat6. Cat6 is Cat6, right? So, why would I not put in the cheapest stuff that I can find? Because it's still Cat6. It'll perform to Cat6 performance.
Yeah, and naturally we assume that things are labeled correctly. It's very easy to call them on their wrong name. You make those assumptions, and standards and things like that are quite convoluted. There are many companies out there. Look, an example of this is HDMI technology, which stands for high definition made impossible, and we all experience connectivity issues. Because a lot of people that are manufacturing, or brands that have this contract manufactured for them, they're not members of HDMI. They're not an adopter member, and not being an adopter member means that you don't get the agreement or the specification to make something too, which also may point to the fact that you're not manufacturing it, and you're contract manufacturing it, and you're trusting that factory. That happens to be overseas in China, speaking a different language that you don't understand, to make something that is compliant. And many of those factories are compliant, but there are some that don't. And we point again to the first statement of cutting corners. If you don't know the specification, how do you know that contract manufacturer is not cutting corners? How do you know that meets compliance? Well, it just happens to have a nice UL number on there that assures you, but then UL, is based around the world, but it comes down to them testing and catching it out. Once it's in the package, once it's in the house, UL are not going to come and turn up and say, hey, this cable is out of compliance, because it takes a lot. So using the right manufacturer that is the member of the USB, the HDMI, they're not HDMI adopter member. The factories have a standard of manufacturing, like a ISO 9001 standard and compliance that allows them to adhere to standards and that kind of thing. And of course, the cost goes up, but it doesn't go up massively. When we're not talking cables. We've been moving away from bespoke cables, handmade cables, for a long time now. And there's cables are not something, especially for digital transmission. It's not something that is a crafted thing. It's something that's repeatedly stamped out, just like you would a laptop or a computer. I would be aghast if I bought my laptop and it was handmade, and the circuit boards were hand assembled and soldered together. It would just not work in the digital transmission age. Yeah.
It's one of the hilarious things, isn't it? That in some circumstances, handmade is definitely the best, and in other circumstances, not handmade is definitely the best. But it depends on the marketing and the application of it. But yeah, when it comes to these kind of cables, you're not looking for handmade. You're looking for that repeatability and reliability.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So I think that you guys are both, you've touched into a really good point, and we've essentially wrapped our first three questions now into one ongoing conversation. And those who are on the listening side, this is how this is kind of go down, because this is not a Q&A type conversation. It isn't a Q&A type topic, in my opinion, either. It really takes, peeling the layers back and digging into them. And that's it was sort of an intentional segue, because peeling the layers back on cable is something that we all need to be doing. We need to understand what we're looking at when doing that. What's inside really truly does matter. And as James touched on earlier, there's a lot of copper that goes into it. There's a lot of thought that goes into how products are engineered from a cable perspective. Get that right, and everything downstream will perform better. Which always brings to mind for me is this notion of chasing ghosts in the field. And so often integrators and technicians will say, they're just on a project and it's fighting. We just keep chasing ghosts. There's just something that's going on. The property must be problematic, or it's got bad juju, or whatever the things are. But sometimes projects just fight, and it's interesting to me how frequently we don't peel back the layers of that and go right back down to the basic foundation and start with the cabling up, which is hard because James and Hugo, you both talked about it. It's in the wall, and it's in the wall for a very long time. You're not necessarily going to go right there first to see if that might be where the ghost might be. But so there's the setup. So I wanted to bring you both into this part of the conversation, is what's inside really does matter. And James, I think maybe best for you to kick off from a technician standpoint or from a purchaser standpoint. When being faced with a need to buy more cable for our team, what should the first step be in identifying? You've talked about the licensing and the relationships that the manufacturers have to make sure that they're on par, but now we're getting down to the nitty gritty and that actual cable. Like how do I know that this piece of cable in front of me, is there a way that do you look at it? Do you test it? Do you bend it? Let's go right back to the basics. And what does that look like?
Well, a lot of cable selection is done by feel, especially in the professional world, because we want something that's flexible but not flimsy. We want something that feels secure and strong to pull with installation. We're looking at things like how slippery the jacket, how smooth the jacket is. In terms of the integration side. When we look deeper, we're also looking at other elements like what temperature variance, and this may not be immediately obvious based on feel, the temperature variance with which the cable operates under. When we work the cable, i.e. strip the jackets, do the termination, we also want to understand how easy it is to do that. If you're terminating the RJ45 connector, which has become the most popular connector type that we're terminating in the field now, you are literally doing thousands of these per job. And if you're doing thousands of these, you really every minute counts. It's a term that we've been used to. Today's age, every second counts. And all of that relates to how tired your hands get, because that's the way you make money as an integrator, your terminations. Whether there are materials that can cause skin splitting and all that kind of stuff. So that comes down to the quality of the material. Some of the things that we look down to that makes a good cable and a bad cable is how consistent the thicknesses are and the gauge, and that is something that we can't see. So that comes down to that. The other thing that we may consider is, well, what level of testing is done on the production line? What type of tolerances? We mentioned thickness, but we can also talk about connectors. What type of tolerance connectors are being made to, or do they snap in? Do they fit really firmly? Do they fit very firmly every time? Because an HDMI cable, you might only be using 10. It's kind of the luck of the draw, right? Are the 10 that I'm using tested at the factory level, or is the factory doing spot testing? These are the things that, yes, look and feel through conversation through your supplier, and understanding them, and these things have been talked to death about, and we just need to make that a standard practice. That when people supply me something, I need to find out whether they know what they're talking about, or they're just trying to sell me something which is cheaper, or they're trying to sell me something which is more expensive, right? We all buy the sizzle, right? But the sizzle may not deliver the benefit of it's not the nourishment part of it, which is the important thing. So I can keep rattling on about this.
Well, I think
you can, and you will.
I think the other thing that's important to consider as well, we're talking about the cable, but also the connectors that go on the end of it. Make sure that you're actually getting the connectors that go with the cable, because when when Kordz have been designing RJ45 crimp plugs, for example, the tolerance of the holes that are going through it is very specific for the cable that's going through it. So if you go sort of marrying up what you had rummaging around at the bottom of your tool bag with whichever cable you happen to have on your van today, you may find that your connectivity mileage may vary.
Yeah. So there's a level of calibration that, and we talked about tooling, the accuracy of making the cable, but the accuracy of the tools that you use in the field and the accuracy of the connectors matching with the cable, so it makes a huge difference to the performance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the speed of putting the system together. Yeah. Which is actually that's the bit that's going to cost you more than the cable is ever going to cost you. So.
Yeah, we've been running this termination challenge thing on and it's been very popular because one, we get to meet people, and two, we get to teach their juniors how to terminate various different cables properly. Well, the way that I've learnt, and the Kordz team has agreed is the best way. But then it's also an opportunity for the seasoned people to test their skills. And there's some really good technicians out there that can get a level of accuracy with our system in well under a minute. The world record is in Australia. It's like 37 seconds. So a little bit of fun can be had with these things, provided you're using a system that provides a level of quality and consistency.
I think it comes down to time, and time is money, and so cutting corners to potentially save cost is definitely not that has never been a pillar of our industry, and it should never be, particularly when talking about building from the strongest foundation possible up, while also future proofing or ensuring a positive technology experience in the future.
She used the word.
I did. I know. It's
in
almost
the
like I just wanted.
It's in the
it's like I
zeitgeist
just wanted
is the
to rip
problem.
you. It is. No, but it's worth repeating, because what we need to do is bring that term into perspective, and what do you do with that? Because consumers are using it too. I want my home to be future proof. Sure, that sounds really good. I can't.
So my good friend Eric Bodley from Future Ready Solutions would say, don't install a service call.
Yeah.
Don't install a potential failure. That doesn't mean, well, always look for the best, And what we mean by best, and we've got to frame this, is not the most expensive, but the best fit for purpose. An example I have is, what's the best car in the world? Well, what am I going to use it for? Right? People might label a Ferrari or a Lamborghini the best car in the world, only to find out, okay, well, we're going to go out into the country on a four-wheel drive track. Well, obviously that is not the best tool for the job. So, have a look at the application and put something in that's going to last longer. Maybe I don't need the highest transmission speed. Maybe I don't need 8K in my bedroom, but I can use a technology that's going to give me reliability and it's going to give me upgradability, such as a Cat6 cable, such as something that's well made. And here's something that we haven't touched on yet. Signal transmission. What is the requirement of signal transmission? Well, with digital signal transmission, it's very different to dealing with the nuance of analog sound, where we're listening for every micro improvement or seemingly impressed on us micro improvement, because these things have an effect. But with digital transmission, we're also looking at noise that's coming off the cable, noise that's going in the cable, and the construction and the tightness and the accuracy of that construction is going to give me a higher performing cable because it's more able to reject noise. Applying how to apply, should I use a shielded connector, or should I use a shielded cable, or should I not use a shielded cable? There are situations where both apply. And having, a well-made cable will also allow us to, in the future, when something else is put in, to avoid those ghosts that Katie, you mentioned. Yeah, Hugo, I cut you off.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, I think there's a whole misnomer actually about digital and the digital domain and how it actually works. And having worked for a digital speaker manufacturer, I went chatting to one of the engineers one day, and he said to me, of course, that digital doesn't really exist. All the signals that we're actually sending are in the analog domain. So we're actually sending analog signals. I'll just try and explain this as best I can. So as much as we'd like to send a 0 and a 1, if you send that down a piece of cable, you can send a voltage high or low. Now, it has to get from high to low. So at that point, we have a transition. So we're now kind of in an analog kind of world. So to send a 1 down a cable, it might be high. To send a 0 down a cable, it'll be low. There's a transition between those two things. And as that gets pushed down the cable, this becomes more of a smooth wave generally with the capacitance that's down it. It can also, as James pointed out, you can pick up interference on it. So you can then get bits of extra signal that are transposed on it, because from physics back in the day, I remember about if you put a cable next to a magnetic field, then you can generate a current in it. Well, we have magnetic fields all around us with power lines creating electromagnetic radiation, which can get picked up in the cable. So now we've got a situation where we've got what started off as we wanted to be a very square kind of high and low signal that's now getting slightly corrupted as it goes down the cable. And then at the far end of the cable in the digital receiving device, you have something that can interpret whether is that a high voltage or is that a low voltage? And that's what turns it back into noughts and ones. And if you get lost in the maze too far, you're going to actually on the silicon chip, it's not really digital, but we'll not go for that far because it just gets a bit too weird and in depth. But in essence, we're actually sending analog signals, and we've just got the ability to try and send it as a 0 or 1 at the other end and receive it at the other end and interpret whether that is a 0 or 1 signal that's being sent down it. But the rates that this is being sent at is just becomes mind-boggling, and the way that it gets sent gets even more and more mind-boggling the higher and higher the data rates. There's some really, really clever boffins do some bonkers stuff with shoving these little spikes up and down the cable. So it does, yeah. Whilst
Yeah,
I went into
and
the
that is
world
also
thinking,
yeah, and that's also like, we talk about HD in our professional world. We talk about HD based T technology. Hugo, you mentioned this as a single sync channel thing.
yeah,
HD based T technology uses something called PAM16. It's from the telecommunications world, and that's when they break up that sine wave or that square wave into various different sections, which is why HD based T cables actually need a higher level of performance that is above that. Even though they say, use Cat6, you actually need a higher grade Cat6. So yeah.
I think
yeah. I mean, I used to.
Sorry, I was going to say, I
We're
think
getting
that
into the
perfectly
weeds.
underscores. Yeah, we are, but that perfectly underscores the needs for this podcast series, for the conversation to continue, and for all of us to really have a much deeper understanding of what's going on. Not only with the transmission, but all of the cables, connectors, and components that are responsible for carrying from one end to the other, all the way through without any degradation. Good luck with that. But this is what this is all about, right? I mean, we've got to peel back the layers.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, we've been at it for a little bit here, so I think it's a good time to start to wind down and let our audience know that we are at the wind down point. But this conversation is absolutely going to continue, and as you can see, it's really easy to splinter off and dive into some of these micro topics, and we need to, and we intend to. So there is not currently a set pace on when we're going to be releasing these episodes. So if you're listening in and curious about that, the only thing I can say is just follow Kordz closely, and as we get into a rhythm. As we're recording and we're dropping new episodes, that'll happen. And as we get into a rhythm, I'm sure that'll level out. But it's an important topic to have, and we need to dive in quickly, because things, as always, are changing, and they're changing rapidly. And we need everybody out in the field to understand what they need to do to make them the best of it, and for everybody on the purchasing end to make sure they're making the right buying decisions. So what happens in the field is nothing but positive. So with that, James, Hugo, do you feel as though we've touched on everything that we needed to today for this intro to
one thing I wanted to one huge curveball, well, it's actually a landmine that I want to throw into the mix is Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
So,
actually, no, we don't need any of this. Let's just all do it wirelessly. What are we messing around with? I can do it all on Wi-Fi.
So I think we can go into more depth into a future discussion about this, but generally, Wi-Fi versus cabling, even Wi-Fi systems require cabling to the Wi-Fi device. Electronics are growing exponentially, as we talked about. Where we used to have one phone, we've now got an iPad and a phone and a laptop, and multiple. Everyone's got multiple channels, and we're boosting the signal to manufacture to get good signal. There's technology like beamforming that's tracking your devices now. So internally, Wi-Fi devices, I can tell from a Wi-Fi device, I can hack that and tell you specifically that you've been sitting on the toilet for too long. And back to cabling, really the only way to make safe and secure is to wire your devices. The only way to have reliability is to wire your devices. And I would go about minimizing Wi-Fi because it's not good for us to sit in a low-powered microwave oven, which has become our house, and continue to add more devices that work wirelessly. But it's something that I feel that we should expand on and talk more in depth with.
Yeah, definitely. Because, from a consumer point of view, what am I being told by my internet service provider? That they can provide me with unbreakable mesh Wi-Fi in my house.
Yeah.
And that's their tagline. But as we know in the integration industry, that's not. Yeah, we got to help find people ways of breaking that down and explaining to their consumers and customers that maybe that isn't the right thing for them and they're integrated home.
Yeah. Maybe we could have a segment also talking about the different internet services that are coming. The technologies like Starlink and the cable Wi-Fi and there's this massive growth of GSM Wi-Fi modems, and why that may or may not work, and talk about bandwidth and hooking that up for success. Because that really is the backbone of all our security and entertainment experience. So, well.
Yeah, and that all obviously falls underneath connectivity. So I think it's a great subject to explore in the future. So, all right, guys. Well, let's wind this down and let everybody get back to their day or their evening, whatever time it is that they're choosing to consume this podcast. Hugo, thank you again for joining us. If you wouldn't mind, share with us again your contact information for both of you. How, if people wanted to follow or engage with you or your brand, how do they do that? Ready, Hugo, go.
Well, so LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me. So Hugo Fitzjohn on LinkedIn. As far as I can work out, there's one of me.
How can that possibly
really?
be?
Yeah.
All right, and James, how about you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best way to find me. You'll see a photo of me. The description is I'm a cable nerd. So come and connect with me on LinkedIn. Should you want to find more information about Kordz, then come to our website. Our socials are hashtag at Kordz Global. So find us on social media for information. On the Kordz website page, there is also a contact us page. So if you have any technical inquiries, you want some troubleshooting advice, I invite you to come and try us. See whether we can help you out, and if you're not a Kordz customer, we'll indoctrinate you and make you drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, and James can be found at most of the CEDIA Tech Summits throughout the rest of the year.
That's right.
I'll be at the one in London as well.
I was going to say, and at London, you'll see Hugo and friends, I'm sure. So, yeah. And I wanted to add into, as James mentioned, the Kordz website again. That's www.kordz.com. Peruse the site. You will find Kordz has been spending quite a bit of time over the last couple of years developing some really great content that really dives into a lot of the subject matter that we talked about today and what we're going to be touching on in the future. One that you may find that's very interesting is the 7 signs of quality cable, how to spot quality cable. And I think that is a good one to point to after today's discussion. You'll find that on the website. You'll also find it out on social. Kordz has done a great job of promoting that, as a couple of publications have picked that up as well. And thank you for the coverage of that. Yeah. Trade Publications, we appreciate you. We do.
Yeah, and there's a lot of tech guides on the website that are free. And we put out white papers on a regular basis. We're a company that doesn't put out marketing. Like, if you join our newsletter and things like that, we don't want to sell things to you. We want to make you better and provide good, solid education that is at a standards level. So if we improve, there's plenty of opportunity for everyone in this industry because it is growing at such a rapid pace. What we're lacking is good, solid knowledge, and we really want to contribute our bit, our specialty bit, which is the connectivity part of things. And we urge other vendors to also do the same for their part as well, as part of the complete experience. It's impossible to know everything. I think Hugo touched on this, that our knowledge that we need to gain is vast. And it is impossible for us to be a specialist in everything now. So we need to come together as a team to put these systems together reliably. Yeah. Thanks everyone for the time.
Thanks for listening in.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to today's conversation. I'm Katye McGregor Bennett. This has been an episode of AV Trade Talk. If there is a topic that you would like to discuss, either solo or you want to bring some friends along, happy to do that. Just hit me up on the sphere and let me know what you're looking to talk about. Let's have that conversation. AV Trade Talk is across all podcast platforms. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will catch you on another episode. James, Hugo, have a great day. I'll catch you again. Thanks.
Thanks, Katye.
Goodbye.